Hey everyone, thank you for your submissions to the Q&A video we posted. The amount we received was incredible and it took a while for us to get through them all, but we have, and here are our answers to the ones we chose. The way we'll answer the questions is this. I'll be reading the questions out, and we've pulled various answers from the dev team, whether it's regarding programming, sprite work, or lore. The question will be shown on screen, and the names of the devs answering the question will appear right underneath. Some will be using mics, and some have just responded with text. With that, here's our first question. We hope you enjoy. Hjalti Dal Hoigaarde asks, why did you choose the name Calamity? Fabsol responds, I thought Calamity would be a proper name for a mod that's meant to reflect my preferences in terms of game design. There's a lot of insane stuff in the mod, to the point of it being almost chaotic. Adi Ion asks, will Calamity be reworked for 1.4 Terraria? Fabsol responds, highly unlikely. Our sprites are already up to 1.4 standards, and the code probably won't require significant changes.
Whenever Terraria mod loader is ready for 1.4, Calamity will be adjusted to fit the new mod loader. We aren't planning on making any significant changes unless necessary.
Ozan asks, what has inspired the reworks to most of the bosses, such as Devourer of Gods, Supreme Calamitas, and more recently Bumbleburb, and additions such as the Abyss or Sunken Sea? Fabsol responds, for the bosses, I tend to see ways to improve them, even if I said I was done working on them in the past. As for the biomes, it's the same thing. We see improvements that could be made. Hydrochloric Acid asks, if you could change one thing about vanilla Terraria, what would it be? Fabsol responds, the code, so that the game can run better and be easier to mod. Bryn for the Win asks, will Calamity ever meet its final update one day? Fabsol responds, yes. I'm Mr. Doggo asks, did you ever think that Calamity would become this popular? Fabsol responds, no. I honestly thought the mod would have died within 2 years after release. Army Idiot asks, what was the original inspiration for Calamity, and what would you guys say blew it into the public view? Fabsol responds, the Exo Avalon mod and Bomb Productions YouTube videos about it. What made the mod so popular was probably the post-Moonlord content and the new difficulty modes. Beans O'Clock asked, what are you doing with Rogue, now that throwing is planned to be removed? Fabsol responds, we're never getting rid of Rogue content. The fact 1.4 is abandoning the throwing class doesn't have any impact on the Rogue class.
Terraria mod loader has confirmed that when 1.4 comes around, it will preserve throwing, so Rogue will not need to change at all.
Christian Schick asks, what is your favorite thing to work on in Calamity? Any particular bosses, weapons, and mechanics fun to design? Fabsol responds, boss fights and difficulty modes.
While I am mostly a pixel artist, I do love the general discussions on what we could add or improve to the mod. Funny ideas also tend to spawn during these, like for example the belching saxophone. This idea originated because I thought one of the gore sprites of the belching corals looked like a saxophone. So as a joke I created this, and it eventually turned out to be the belching saxophone.
The Phantom 9495 asks, what features added by Calamity are you most and least proud of? Fabsol responds, most proud of Rage, Adrenaline, Revengeance mode, Death mode, and the boss fights. Least proud of? I don't know.
Most of my best work is under the hood programming, like Drop Helper and the 0.11 optimizations. I would say I am least proud of Stellar Contempt.
The features I am most proud of are the music boxes, things related to Poltergeist, and the Stratus set. With the least proud of being some sprite works of the Flash Totem I made and the first version of the Eidolon staff. That one was way too bulky.
Dodu asks, what's your favorite song from the mod? Fabsol responds, quite a few, including Sulphur Sea, Devourer of Gods, Astromorius, Crabulon, and the Abyss themes. Froust responds, easily my favorite of the mod is Return to Slime. I loved the vibe of the song a lot.
I have more of a shared top 5 that includes Stained Brutal Calamity, The Filthy Minds, the Devourer of God non-stop mix, Treasures Within the Abomination, and Interstellar Stomper, though the other songs are very good as well. with my least favorite being Left Alone. For some reason I always seem to forget that song exists.
Mr. Naren asks, how are you coming up with the ideas for the boss fights? Fabsol responds, we just either make stuff up as we go along, or take inspiration from boss fights in other games. An example being Siren and Leviathan, which took inspiration from Ornstein and Smo from Dark Souls. At least in my mind it did. The Darkness King asks, what made you want to become a developer for the Calamity mod, and have you learned anything new from when you became a dev for the mod?
One thing I definitely learned from being a developer myself is that there's a lot more going into game development than I first imagined.
The Minecraft Pro Gamers League asks, do you guys plan on improving the Summoner class even more?
I see someone has been watching Hectic lately. Personally, I'm all for cool and unique summoner content. The coders that will have to program those wacky minions, however.
Haggis Llama asks, how long does creating and adding a boss to the game take? Fabsol responds, the sprites usually take the longest. It can take months for a boss to be sprited sometimes. Programming the boss usually doesn't take too long. I hammer it out in a week or less usually. The hardest part is testing the boss to make sure it's fair, balanced, and interesting, which can take a long time and usually still takes place long after the boss has been released. An example being Devourer of Gods, who recently got a teleportation mechanic even though he's been in the mod since it started. Magic Art Illusions asks, hey, what made you guys become committed to creating the Calamity mod? Fabsol responds, Terraria is a fun game, and University was boring, so I decided to start modding Terraria in my spare time.
For me, it first started off as nothing more than a simple interest in wanting to merely help with testing, back when the mod was lacking testers. I was just a simple tester at the time, and decided to help merely because I wanted to. After a while though, the simple interest started turning into what I would probably call a genuine fondness for it, and over time the mod has grown on me so much that a part of my heart is pretty much rooted in it. As cheesy as that sounds. At this point, I'm just content to be a part of this wonderful team of developers, and I'm looking forward to seeing or helping with any new things we'll be making in the future.
Powerhawk14 asks, do you think that you will ever try making a standalone game? If so, will it be similar to Terraria or different? Fabsol responds, maybe, and it would probably be somewhat similar to Terraria, but certainly far different in both style and gameplay. Duck-Flavored Tea asks, have you ever made a mod for a game other than Terraria?
Yep, I've modded Minecraft for over 5 years, but I don't make mods, only a private mod pack for friends.
Diego Acevedo asks, what is the team's opinions on the other big and small mods in the modding community? Fabsol responds, I like every single mod as long as it's not maliciously affecting other mods, and just because I might not particularly enjoy certain mods, that doesn't mean I'm going to ignore the amount of time and effort that goes into most of them. Caps asks, are there any challenges or frustrations in developing a mod for an audience that skews young?
Quite a lot, actually. So many, I'm actually kinda not sure where to start. But if I were to pick one main thing, it's getting valid feedback from the community on certain stuffs, especially things concerning balancing our bosses. People of the younger demographic tend to have more emotional criticisms than constructive ones, which are often not applicable to the mod's design. Examples are expressing their opinions as if they are fact, complaining and hating on something for the sake of it, while being unable to provide sufficient explanations as to why, or just trying to prove a meaningless point, using vague arguments that have little to no substance backing it up. This makes it quite difficult for us to trust inputs coming from anyone outside of our team at all, as more often than not we're at risk of getting led on wild goose chases. That is, unless they either have solid evidence and arguments backing their complaints up, or have a trustworthy track record. And frankly, the people who qualify for either are quite lacking in our community as of present time.
Spooter asks, do you foresee a concrete end goal for the mod, as in content, optimization, etc., or are you going to continue on the project for as long as there are people who want to work on it? Fabsol responds, yes, the end goal for me is Zarok, the final super boss of Calamity. Once that's done, I feel like we can move on to something else.
There is definitely a finite set of major content we want to include in Calamity, meaning it will be done eventually. Incremental improvements and things we think of along the way, those could continue forever. We'll see.
Wayne Darvinzi asks, how would you compare people's view on the modding community back when Calamity was first starting out versus how it is now? Fabsol responds, many people's expectations and opinions have become distorted as the mods have gotten better and more popular. I feel that most people expect far too much from Terraria mods nowadays. Most mods don't have a team like Calamity does, and people should temper their expectations with that in mind. 302 asks, where do the ideas of most of the Calamity weapons come from? Are they linked to some sort of lore, or are they there just for fun? Fabsol responds, some weapon ideas come from other games, like Borderlands 2, Resident Evil, etc. Most weapon ideas are made for fun or to upgrade already existing or vanilla weapons. Ben responds, ideas for weapons often come from just brainstorming and imagination. Like roughly a week before the Acid Rain update dropped, Tier 2 had no weapons and such. Pinky then thought up some ideas, and then they got sprited, and then I programmed some of them. Other times, I go on a tangent and make something of my own will, like Seeking Scorcher and Hedipelagic Echo. Oftentimes, weapon ideas are inspired by other games, but with so many weapons in the mod, there is no real definitive answer to this question to encompass them all. Gamer of Toads asks, have you guys ever thought of expanding the mixed class armors and weapons from Vanilla Terraria, Frost Set, or Forbidden Set? I feel like there should be more armor and weapons related to the mixed class opportunity for more unique gameplays and styles, maybe even one with Rogue.
Calamity adds a few all-class armors already, such as the Astral and Fearmonger sets. We tend to favor truly all-class sets instead of dual-class because it gives the player more freedom. You can play whatever two classes you want when wearing an all-class armor.
Patricius116 asks, how do you feel about Journey's End? Fabsol responds, legitimately terrified, and yet I'm also excited due to the balance changes they're making for certain bosses and items being reworked. I'm glad it's an update that will bring more attention to the game and the mods, but I'm not looking forward to updating Calamity for it, nor am I looking forward to rebalancing all the new content it adds.
Personally, I am pretty excited to see what Relogic has in store for us for 1.4, like the new music tracks. How do they sound like? Or what have they added in the underground? A couple days ago they did announce official Team Modloader support, which pretty much cranked up my hype to its maximum. And overall I cannot wait to play Journey's End when it launches on May 16th.
BlueGamer3355 asks, I've been wondering how you would react if someone made an extension mod for Calamity as a sign of appreciation for your efforts.
There are already some Calamity add-on mods out there, and it's pretty funny to see how modded mods. It's nice to see how the community expands the mod, however, that's only if the add-on doesn't completely break the main mod.
Eltzer asks, what other video games inspired you while making the Calamity mod? Fabsol responds, every game that I played to stave off my depression while growing up was an influence while creating Calamity. Resident Evil, Bioshock, Terraria itself, Borderlands, Metal Gear Rising, and the list goes on. The game design philosophies of those games heavily influenced my design choices for Calamity. X-Man101 asks, what was the most interesting boss to code? Fabsol responds, for Calamity originals, probably either Providence, Devourer of Gods, Yeren, or Supreme Calamitous, simply due to how complex their AIs are and all the little nuances they have in their fights. For Vanilla Rev Plus reworks, probably either Brain of Cthulhu, The Twins, Golem, or Moonlord, mostly because I greatly overhauled those fights and love how they turned out. Emperor Frozen Toes asks, why was the name Rogue chosen for the previously throwing class weapons?
We picked Rogue out of a batch of names we tossed around during a brainstorming session. These names also included suggestions such as Bandit or Ninja, but in the end we decided to go with a more general name that probably wouldn't be so creatively restrictive, and Rogue was pretty good for a class focused around the stealth mechanic.
Nam asks, what's the reason you started to work on Calamity as a dev?
I personally joined the Calamity server around April of 2017, after Chippy's Couch uploaded a video about the Arc of the Elements. There I began to make sprites for the first time in my life, and over time I began to develop some skills for it. Around August I was working on Poltergeist, and it was accepted, and that gave me a huge boost. And over time more tasks were delivered to me, and in March of 2018 I joined the official team. And from there I just kept going up and just kept making sprites for the mods. And I still love to do what I'm doing now.
Lieutenant Cultist asks, do you have any hint for those who want to make their own mod like Calamity? What is the most important thing to remember? Ben responds, I wouldn't try to be like Calamity exactly. Obviously, you should incorporate your own original ideas and never give up. Work as a team, and for programmers specifically, try to keep your code somewhat organized. Organized code makes it easier for multiple programmers to work together. Most importantly, this project is for fun, and don't ever forget that. Oscar Bloon asks, what moment made you realize that this mod was something big that tons of people loved? Fapsel responds, when people started to become jealous of its success, when people were coming to me for help with their own mods, and when I saw a lot of people around the community coming to help me out with the project. Pixelar asks, do you already have the entire lore and rest of the mod progression planned out, or are you still undecided on a lot of future content?
Generally, yes. The rest of the mod's progression is planned out and straightforward.
Mr. Black asks, how close is Calamity to completion?
It's impossible to judge, really. On the one hand, we have less than 5 bosses left to add. On the other hand, there's so much more than bosses in the mod.
Sensor Pally asks, what tips would you have to an aspiring developer, to someone who wishes to do world building? Fabsol responds, focus on building up your relationships with others, be transparent with them, and they will help you out. Outside of relationships, be sure to maintain confidence in your work and, if you ever get stuck on something difficult, remind yourself that you're smart enough to overcome it. I've been stuck in several situations where I felt like I wasn't good enough to get something done, but eventually I realized what needed to be done. Other than that general advice, always have a plan for whatever you're doing before you start developing or programming it. It will save you a lot of time in the long run. Spectral asks, what was the hardest part or the largest challenge during early stages of development? Fabsol responds, learning how to accept the community for what it is. Red Tenaxer asks, what's the most stressful thing about the community? Fabsol responds, the people that know absolutely nothing about game design making assertions about how bad Calamity is. Stupid people like those stress me out because no matter what I say, it feels like they just don't understand or are so stuck in their ways that they'll never change. Those people drive me insane. Dev Aesthetic asks, are people allowed to make fan games based around the characters and the lore of the mod? With proper credit, of course. Popa responds, yes, as long as it's made clear that it is fan-made and credit is given where it's due, a fan game would be really nice to see. Stephen asks, with the bosses, does every concept come into development? Do different ideas mold into one, or are they planned out perfectly beforehand?
Bosses usually have a near-complete plan when they start being programmed, but their behavior changes dramatically during testing. This is especially true if an attack is unbalanced or unfair, or if the boss is too easy or difficult overall.
Quadratordo asks, I was wondering how much sway did the community hold in your vision of the mod's development?
We have an organized system to allow the community to deliver high-quality suggestions directly to the developers, but the community generally has no influence over the mod's core content and major updates.
Hansterman asks, how will you adapt the Revengeance and Death modes now that Master Mode is coming with Journey's End? Cabalion responds, now this is just me, but I consider Master Mode non-existent. I don't see what it adds to the table except for dragging bosses on even longer, so at the moment we probably won't take Master Mode into account. Fapsol responds, I'll be making a separate Calamity mod add-on mod that adds optional support and changes for Master Mode. Guahavel asks, what's your most hated instance of vanilla spaghetti code?
Tile code. After having spent over 12 hours debugging the Ancients Awakened world generation crash, I think it's a miracle tiles even work at all.
Ben responds, the existence of multiplayer, its ability to break things, and demanding need for netcode ID tags. Like, why on earth should set bonus tooltips break boss summons? Lumpkin asks, what is Calamity's philosophy on difficulty? More specifically, when does a mechanic or a difficulty spike in progression become too much for it to be implemented, or becomes removed or nerfed? Fapsol responds, we try to keep the difficulty on par with the tiers, as in, Desert Scourge is about as difficult as King Slime, because both are pre-Eye of Cthulhu bosses. If a boss is seen as being too difficult for a certain tier, we usually nerf its stats, AI, or both. The same applies for the reverse. If something is too easy for the tier, it's usually buffed to compensate. The same philosophy can be applied to weapons, accessories, etc. Sega Boost asks, what's the relationship between the Calamity dev team and Relogic like? Do you both interact often?
The Calamity team doesn't interact directly with Relogic. We do our own thing, and they do theirs.
Eli I Think Human asks, what major concept did you have planned for the mod that was completely scrapped? Cabalion responds, we were originally going to have a bigger arc for Guzma as a teaser. This teaser, or should I say teasers, were the future bosses. There were 3 of them. Ancient Doomsayer, which was the lunatic cultist, Devourer of Universes, which was the Devourer of Gods, and Dragon God Yaren, who was, well, Yaren. Originally they played an integral role to Guzma's battle, with all 3 needing to be defeated. After backlash and the unnecessariness of these 3, however, they were axed, the soul artifacts used to summon them being repurposed for their current iteration. Feels Good asks, would there be another tier list video made by the devs or possibly by famous Calamity YouTubers like Crabbar or Leviathan? We would love to see one. Pixel responds, definitely. We do plan on creating a tier list in the near future, and hopefully we can host one during the summer months. The reason for the long delay after the first one had mainly been an issue of schedule constraints, along with needing a strong topic to create an enjoyable tier list about. We will let everyone know what we plan to do next. Lilac Down Deep asks, I know for a fact working with y'all has been one of the best moments in my life and worked me through some very dark patches, and culminated in me actually visiting Fabsol. How has development affected your relationship with each other, and how much has it affected your own personal life, good or bad? Would you want to meet each other in person? Fabsol responds, I got to meet you and that helped me out a lot mentally. So far I've made very few enemies and a lot of friends, and yeah, I'd really like to meet everyone in person someday.
As for me, I personally find it quite the enjoyment to work with the other members of the Calamity mod team. When I first came around the community, it was a bit scary for me, but they embraced me more and more, and shortly after I started to open up for them as well, and nowadays I can just safely say that they're just more than just my colleagues. I consider them to be my friends and in a way a family. And I hope I can actually meet them one day in the future.
Pixel responds, meeting people in person, especially the rest of the developers, is something I really want to do. Becoming a part of the team not only helps me feel inclusive in an amazing group of people, but those same people support me outside of development through much of my emotional instability. Though a lot of them are great people. I just wish I had more time to dedicate for them. Shaolin 2 asks, if Relogic proposes the team to add Calamity as an official part of Terraria, will you accept? Fabsol responds, I'd most likely never allow that, but if Relogic wanted to add certain features from Calamity into the vanilla game, it might be interesting, such as the enemy damage reduction system we created or something else.
Such an event would be unprecedented, but due to the legal strictness of officially working with Relogic, we would almost certainly decline.
Cursed Being asks, what's the process for suggestions and their development/denial once they are sent to the mod server? Ben responds, once the suggestion is sent to the dev server, it is posted and tagged, like effort and what it pertains to. Developers can then vote on them. After a 2-day period, a suggestion can then be marked as approved or rejected, depending on the majority vote, which will be reflected in the main server with the appropriate reaction. However, approved does not equal implemented. But, as a programmer myself, I keep tabs on the suggestions, and for many low-effort quality of life suggestions that are approved, I'll do it. If I think the suggestion is a good idea and it's easy enough to do, there's a good chance it'll happen. I'm not the only programmer to go through and implement suggestions, but I have found that I am the most frequent individual to go through and implement them. Janiz asks, do you have a plan on making a new class like Rogue? It would be great. Fabsol responds, probably not. Creating Rogue and properly fleshing it out took a huge toll on the dev team, and I'd rather not go through that process again. Ben responds, absolutely not. I hate to be blunt like this, but creating a new class is an intense amount of work. It requires a whole slew of weapons to fill out every tier, armors, and accessories. Not only do they need to be sprited, they also need to be programmed. Additionally, creating a new class needs something unique to set it apart. Rogue has stealth strikes to try and fill this niche to separate it from ranged and throwing. Although, I'll be honest, stealth strikes were a mistake. They are annoying to program and gameplay-wise, they're difficult to get value out of without being broken and overpowered. Unfortunately, it's too late to turn back now, and we are sticking with it. For the amount of work that Rogue created, keep in mind, there were already several existing weapons before the switch. We are not adding another full-fledged class. Amazing Derpling II asks, how long does it usually take you guys to make a quality update for the Calamity mod?
Well, you would have to wait until an update has finished cooking in a pan. Okay, no, but in all seriousness, it depends. Some updates are big, some updates are smaller, which means development time also varies. Some may take up a month, some may take up multiple months, but overall, an update is ready when it is ready.
The Blazing Top Hat asks, what was the very first thing implemented into the mod? Fabsol responds, if I recall correctly, it was the Galactica Blade, now known as the Galactus Blade. The sword used to fire a shotgun spread of cyan-colored meteors. Prisman Kordic asks, where did the names Xerac, Drayden, Calamitous, Garen, Garum, and Noxus come from? Fapsol responds, combinations of parts of words, other names, or letters that I came up with after some thought. We Are Toast asks, do you plan on doing more developer podcasts in the future? I really enjoyed the Calamity Weapon tier list podcast back in August of last year, and it would be great to be in for more. Pixel responds, as with the previous question about tier lists, we will definitely hold more podcasts. Here's a little secret. Development progress has slowed down due to 1.4 adaptation, and final exams are almost over. Expect one soon. Ad asks, where did Old Duke come from? Like, when and how did you decide you were making it a thing? Popo responds, we've always known we wanted a boss to go with the Acid Rain event, which turned into the Old Duke. Surprisingly, Old Duke has always been something we wanted to add since early 2019, a little over a year before the Acid Rain update released. Delphi Ngombe asks, haven't you ever thought of making one mega mod by collaborating with the makers of Thorium, Tremor, Juiced, etc. to keep the game alive after Journey's End, and it could be your way of saying goodbye?
Now that Terraria Mod Loader is going to be official free DLC, there's no need to say goodbye. Modding will live on as part of Terraria's official legacy.
Game Guru asks, how far in advance were recent additions like the Sunken Sea and the Acid Rain event planned out before being added in? Alternatively, did anything just come out of the blue? Popa responds, major additions never come out of the blue. Ideas are usually brought up in areas lacking content and filtered through heavy discussions between one another. This process can repeat for months, up to a year, and over time, we begin to have a clearer understanding of what we envision. Enervaria asks, would you all say that you sufficiently beta test your updates before release, or do you all think there's room for improvement on that fact?
Most of the time, yes. The testers work very hard to make sure most items are balanced and functional before release. However, we would sometimes run into problems regarding deadlines, balancing roadblocks, or burnouts that allow bugs or unbalanced items to slip through into the public update. There's definitely room for improvement though. Nothing would harm in having more testers. We'd love to be more careful during the testing process too, so that we can avoid the aforementioned bugs.
The very generic username asks, what questions are you tired of hearing over and over again from the community? Skeletoni responds, there is a whole list of them, but I'll only list a few. Calamity style, Yaren and Old Duke are Fishron clones, Terraria style, Supreme Calamitous win, bosses are vanilla clones, etc.
The question goes as follows. Why are Poltergeist's drops not blue instead of pink?
John Mill asks, how does it feel to see such a passion project become as big as it is now?
Honestly, it's mind-blowing. A good example is seeing the Calamity server grow over the years, now ticking at almost 60,000 members. It's crazy!
Guy on Phone asks, how long did it take to make the very first Calamity update? Fapsol responds, about 3 months while I was at university if I remember correctly. Frey asks, how many developers does this mod have? I absolutely love this mod. Keep the great work up. Cobalion responds, there are currently 30 devs and 3 interns at the time of this writing. I'll go in order of them now. Nitro, Fabsol, Uncle Danny, Merp, Ozatron, Lord Metarex, Ebanplay, Skeletony, Now, Sock, Popo, Runefield, Cooper, and Redden, Gram of Salt, Nincity, Purple Necromancer, Tiny Manx, Inanis, Cobalion, Ben, Pixel Gray, Terrian Muse, Pinky, Dominic K, Bravioli, Altera Kira, Mindcat, Rover Drive X, and Bashiro Usui. Oh yeah, we have a few interns as well. Those 3 are Vaikia, Jace, and Fraus. They might not be developers, but they're glad to help with anything we have planned. And thank you. It's not easy at all, but we're pulling through and doing perfectly fine. Frankie Rodriguez asks, my question for you is, how is the Calamity team assembled? Fabsol responds, by talking to people and accepting help from them when necessary. However, at this point I often no longer need to seek out new devs myself. People usually accept the dev invitation if we present them with it.
Kidnapping. And by kidnapping I mean it has been assembled over time, with people joining and leaving. I became dev by respirating Halfmind, animating the new Leviathan, and spriting a lot of other stuff. Others became dev by testing a lot of stuff for the mod, by providing help with code, etc.
Jeff Burden asks, so what are you guys planning with those 5 unique unobtainable weapons added in the latest update? Fabsol responds, something to do with Draydon. Ben responds, their existence will become relevant in the next major update. Be patient and you will know in time. Think of these weapons as like a teaser. Neon asks, how is everyone doing during these times of crisis? Skeletoni responds, surprisingly, I'm actually enjoying this situation. I'm sure all introverts will agree with me on this. Fabsol responds, I'm doing alright. At least I have certain video games, chores, and the mod to keep me busy.
To be quite honest, I wish I was in quarantine. Because outside of developing for the Calamity mod, I have a real life job. And it has been quite hectic. Like so many customers, and also customers that are being quite rude to me and my other colleagues. It is taking a toll on me, but thankfully working on the mod is a pretty good stress reliever.
MJX7 asks, have you ever thought of making an animated series based upon the Calamity lore and the path the player takes throughout the game? Fabsol responds, no, but it would be interesting if an animated series were ever to be created. Rico Lay asks, did the Witch Supreme Calamitous have a human body first, or is that just the way she is from the very start of the lore?
The witch originally had a human form, yes.
Brady Rothfuge asks, is the actual meteor/infection connected to the Dark God /Noxus?
It's implied in the Astral Infections lore that the virus was mutated due to Noxus' presence.
Daniel Chen asks, why does the Plaguebringer Goliath and the Queen Bee have very similar music? Are they the same creature, or are they somehow tied together by lore? Skeletoni responds, Plaguebringer Goliath is basically the same species as the Queen Bees. They have been experimented on by Yerm scientists and mechanized into an uncontrollable killing machine. Caramel Monk 381 asks, how do you plan to develop the mod's lore? I would like to see a full story or something like that.
For now, I'm much more comfortable laying just the groundwork, each character, the most basic of details, etc. In the future, it'd be interesting to see if we could write other forms of the lore beyond just third-person narratives, such as short stories and character profiles. That style of relaxed, sparse storytelling, however, doesn't seem suited to the kind of story we're trying to tell here, so I'm uncertain.
Cherenkov asks, what will become of Silva? I thought she would come with this updated Sulphurous Sea. I hope there will be a way to bring her back to life and make her a town NPC.
Silva's a character who's been underutilized, save with Brailer and Status. Besides just dying to show how tough Yaram's forces are, and by extension the guy himself, they don't really serve any purpose, which I'd like to change. For example, tying Cygnus more clearly in with Status has been a step in the right direction. For the moment, it's too much trouble to bring around the character again to give them a place in-game, but I can't say that they will have an influence in the future.
Garrett, Dragon of the Jungle asks, what's your... Juan David Acuña Pinzon asks, you want to translate the mod. Mi inglés no es el mejor, pero tengo la esperanza de que algún día responda a esta pregunta, al menos si pueden y quieren, utilicen el traductor de Google, aunque tenga muchos fallos, aunque, ¿sai? Personas que estarían dispuestas a ayudar. Gracias por todo.
Lo comprendo.
Spack Alberry asks, why are rogue and throwing separated kinds of damage? Why are rogue and throwing separated kinds of damage? Whoa!
Rogue weapons have benefited from throwing boosts for months, and all rogue weapons are internally throwing. What are you talking about?
Gabriela's05 asks, do you update the Calamity mod with other space invasion and the possibility to travel in another planet? Galaxy emoji, alien emoji, star emoji, earth emoji.
Breaking news! Calamity becomes a Starbound mode? Question mark, question mark, question mark?
Brav asks, how do I get dev?
Excellent question. There are a few ways to become a developer, but the first crucial step is that you have to be trusted within the community in one way or another. From then on, you can branch out into different paths. You can either sprite a lot and have your sprites be recognized by the devs, beta test a lot, or help with programming for the mod. So thank you for your question, bruv. Wait a second.
Coolbeans9001 asks, how do I beat Eye of Cthulhu?
To beat the Eye of Cthulhu, shoot at it until it dies.
Audrey asks, when will Fogbound be added as a boss? Ben responds, I don't know what you're on. It's already in the game. You just haven't looked hard enough. As a programmer, I hide all sorts of Easter eggs into the mod. Generic username asks, which devs do and don't play Fortnite? Wesock asks, sanity levels?
Fun fact, in much older versions of Calamity, rage was called stress, and produced various anxiety effects up to and including heart attacks when it was too high.
Kame asks, why did Merp say that you guys had 100k instead of 10k in announcements?
Balls? Smalls.
Yatsuzume asks, what was the most interesting bug or glitch that showed up during playtesting?
At one point, Mechworm glitched out so hard that it warped the space-time continuum.
And that wraps up our Dev Q&A, and we'd like to thank you again for the questions and for having gotten this channel to 10,000 subscribers in the first place. That's a lot of people! To close off this video, we'd like to thank DM DOKURO for having been a part of the dev team and providing the music we all love for so long. We're glad that he's decided to move on to different projects for himself, and we hope you continue to provide support for him. That said, thank you for watching. We will see you again.